Hey everyone, I'm Danny from KinkyPolyAtheist.com. I dispel shame around sex, relationships, and spirituality. And today I've got a relationship slash communication topic to talk about, which is triangulation. And honestly, we have all participated in triangulation at some point. So I want to make sure I'm very clear here. When you go and Google triangulation, you're going to get a mixed type of definition. Some definitions are going to sound like it's an accident, and some definitions are going to sound like it's malicious intent. So I want to call out specifically triangulation is basically just a game of telephone. So you have two people who should be talking, but instead of talking, they're passing messages through a third person, right? Like a game of telephone. And that little communication style, first of all, is really muddy. It's not clear communication. It's going to make a mess. But just communicating that way is just communicating, right? The intentions are a totally separate thing that people bring to this communication style. So if your intentions were an accident and you ended up in an accidental game of telephone, then it can still happen. You could still end up in triangulation. If the intentions are malicious, there you go. Now you're in a malicious game of triangulation. So I just want to call out the triangulation that I'm talking about is this game of telephone. The intentions are separate, and every game of telephone is going to have different intentions. So what does this look like? I think a simple example is, say you have parents that are fighting, or divorced parents who are passing messages through their kid. So mom says to the kid, next time you see your deadbeat father, tell him to get a job, right? And then dad says, tell your mom to grow up, like that sort of stuff, where they're just clearly mad at each other or something, but they're not talking to each other, and they're enlisting a third person, in this case a kid, to pass messages. And you can imagine that this is just a mess. It's just going to spiral out of control. This is not going to lead to clear communication. Both of these, in this case, these adults are avoiding talking to each other and using somebody else to somehow pass messages, which is useless. An example of how this has shown up in my life and in my relationships, being poly, I had a situation where I was dating these two really wonderful women, and the situation was amazing. The three of us got along. They got along. We would hang out sometimes. And at some point, they had a disagreement, misunderstanding, whatever you want to call it. And they couldn't or didn't sort it out between them. It ended up, they started sending messages through me. And at the time, I wasn't really savvy about this whole triangulation thing. And I felt like they're having trouble communicating. I'm going to be here to facilitate communication. I'm going to help them see each other eye to eye and let them understand each other. Right? I thought that I was helping out. No. By becoming that middle person, I became the telephone. And basically, I was being crushed in the middle of these two people who were passing messages back and forth through me. They were saying things like, oh, I want this and I want that, and I wish she would, and I wish she would. And then I would end up telling the other person some of that, and then it just became a nightmare, absolute nightmare. Really, what I should have done is I should have said, it sounds like you two need to talk. I'm not going to get caught in the middle of this because it's not going to help. So how about you two sit down and talk, and I'll step out and you guys can sort it out or not. Whatever you guys decide, when you get to the bottom of this, whatever you guys decide, I will support both of you. But I can't be in the middle, right? And that's what I should have done, and I didn't. So the easiest way to get away from triangulation is the moment you're in it, stop playing. Stop playing the game of telephone. Just make it very clear to everybody, hey, I just realized we're playing a game of telephone, and whoever needs to communicate should sit down and communicate, and I'm not playing telephone anymore. I mentioned me being the telephone. I challenged myself here to identify when I've been the cause of triangulation, because I want to make sure everybody out there understands this is human. We have all done this. We have all gotten caught in every position of triangulation. So in times where I have created triangulation, where I have been in the role of being the person who's doesn't want to be talked to and has found a third person to pass messages for me, it usually stemmed around my shy my shy personality, my introvert stuff, some of my social awkwardness. And basically, I had news for somebody that I felt was either going to hurt them or anger them. And rather than just talking to them, I would find a third person to help me kind of like mitigate the risk of passing this message. And that was BS. I basically I was being a coward, and I should not do that. I should pick up the phone, call the person, and say, "Look, I've got some stuff that I need to talk about," and then just sit down with them and talk through it, and not enlist another person to somehow soften the blow or something like that. That's how I found myself using or initiating triangulation or the game of telephone. So, triangulation, stay away from it. As soon as you realize you're in a game of telephone, say no thank you. Say, okay, I'm setting a boundary here. I don't play games of telephone. So we need to figure this out by all sitting down together, or whoever needs to sit down, talk through it. But I'm not playing telephone. I would like to challenge you to ask yourself, when have you played the roles in telephone? All three roles. When have you initiated it? When have you been the telephone? And when have you been the person on the other side who's just receiving spotty communication because they can't get to the person they're trying to talk to? How have you been involved in all three? How have you caused a game of telephone? And it's hard. It's kind of amazing. Like, identifying it in yourself and the situations where you caused it is actually kind of hard. But I challenge you to identify it in yourself, identify it in your past, so that you can conquer it in the future. So I'm Danny with KikiPolyAtheist.com, and I'll catch you guys next time.